I can't believe I have 23 years. You always hear people say a day at a time, and it really is a day at a time. I don't know how the hell I got here. There is something that I read in my sponsor's house recently. His wife, who's celebrated 42 years yesterday, has framed. And what it says is, don't let your length of sobriety mislead you about your depth of recovery. Repeat that to yourself. I will tell you, I really know that. Some days I act like I don't have any sobriety. I always feel authentic. People that know me know I'm authentic, and sometimes it gets me into trouble. It doesn't mean that I'm always coming from a spiritual place. I have another friend who is in England who reminded me today. She calls herself my wife. Her name is Lorraine. She's my age and is coming up on 41 or 42. I can't remember, December. Like Tim, she got sober at 19. She said, sometimes we come from a human place and sometimes we come from a spiritual place. We're humans having spiritual experiences. She says it in a better way than that, but I love it because I am so far from what I used to think somebody with 23 years would be like. And I certainly don't feel it. I want to address the young people thing. I'm very immature, so I fit right in with all of you. I really do. I'm not like a 60-year-old man. I'm 60, but I am so not caught up to that age yet. I don't know if I ever will be, but I'm definitely not. I usually just speak from my heart and my head. I don't know where to start. Like I almost want to start from my childhood. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm a love child. I was the youngest. So I'm just going to go through it like that without any feeling. I was the youngest. My mother, I didn't have alcohol and drugs in my house. My mother was 450 pounds after she had me, being the third child. So she was obese, had food issues her entire life until she died. She also was a compulsive gambler. She was always gambling. So when I first came to AA meetings, when I first tasted this to see if it was something that I identified with, which would have been when I was about 23, I think I made my first meeting. I heard a lot of people just talking about their alcoholic mothers and their drug addicted fathers, or one of them or the other one, and how alcohol was always in their house. And that just gave me a great excuse not to come back because I didn't identify with that. I didn't recognize alcoholism or drug addiction or any of it until I went to rehab, which was in January of 1989. And I was 26 years old. It was there that I learned about the disease. I'm not going to go into the story of how, or basically there was somebody that we used to have meetings that came in. So it wasn't, I'm not going to say it was the rehab that got me sober. The meetings that came in, we had meetings, 2 meetings a day. People would come in. I was a Wall Street executive, gay, and a bit of a snob. And this blue collar, thick neck, 250 pounds, 6'2" iron worker came to speak at a meeting. I think I was there like 5 days at that point. The rehab I went to, which is closing in January, was called Veritas Villa. It had contracts with firemen, police department, with iron workers, construction, Con Edison, which is our electric company in New York, that's where I am. I didn't identify with any. Anyway, this guy sat down, this big, which I would have never been friends with this guy. And he started to talk. And the first things out of his mouth were, when I was a little kid, when I was a little boy, I identify with this 100%, by the way. I never felt like I fit anywhere. I felt unloved and unloved. I was very neglected. But he said it like this. And when he said those words, my ears, my whole spirit came up. And he talked about having a disease. And it wasn't until he learned he had disease that wanted him to hate himself, wanted him sick, wanted him dead. I was like, that's what it is. And he said, I found out in these rooms that I'm not a bad person, just a sick person, and I need help. Not my fault. I always, of course, thought that my feelings of not fitting in, not belonging, feeling like I was unlovable, and it didn't help that I was neglected a lot, that I was sexually abused as a kid when I was starting at 8 years old, had multiple perpetrators. That did not help me, but I didn't pick up drugs or alcohol until I graduated high school. I tried it. I didn't like it. I tried pot. I tried mescaline. I tried everything that high schoolers did back in the 70s, because that's when I was in high school. Like a lot of your parents probably, but maybe your grandparents, I don't know. I didn't like any of it. I hated the feeling of losing control. Now, of course, in retrospect, I look back and I'm like, of course, I didn't want to lose control because I had no control as a kid over anything that went on, over my starving or being poor, my mother, the way she looked, the kids would make fun of me, the sexual abuse. I certainly didn't have any control over any of the things that went on in my childhood. If I drank or smoked a little pot or tried to, I felt out of control. I was like, I hate this. When I graduated high school, I went to my first gay bar. And I went to my first gay bar. I live around the corner from it now. It's so funny. I walked in and I saw men dancing with each other and I saw them having a great time. I saw people kissing. Back then, it was only in the bars, really, or in the cruising areas that you would be able to see something like that. You didn't experience it out in the open at all, ever. I was like, wow. And then I always say I was a hot kid. I was. So because of that, I was 17. You could drink at 18, but 17, it didn't matter in New York then. You could drink at 14. I went in there and guys started buying me drinks. I told you I was neglected as a kid. No, I was severely neglected. I remember having one friend under 12, 13. I remember having one friend. This was attention. This was the attention I've been looking for my whole life. Back then in bars, if somebody was buying you a drink and you already had a drink, they would put a coaster down on the bar to represent your next drink. Somebody bought you a drink. My goal was to have as many coasters as I can get. And I got lots of them. From that first night, I got drunk. So drunk, rum and Coke. Ugh. That's what I drank. And I threw my guts up and I was there 5 nights a week right from there on. It didn't matter that I lost control. I never wanted anyone to know back then I liked men. I had a girlfriend. My friends now can't believe it. They're like, what? Yeah, people couldn't tell that I was gay. Back then, people couldn't tell. No one knew. And I didn't want guys to know I had crushes on them. I didn't want anyone to know. Here, I can be drunk, be out of control, and get a lot of attention. Well, that led to a lot of drugs. I went fast. I went into the fast lane very fast. I was a Studio 54 guy. I went head on. I was one of the original club kids. I was at the openings of everything. I had a 4-year boyfriend, a relationship for 4 years. That went on. That was, I don't know if any of you know Sylvester's music, but his manager was my boyfriend for 4 years. Sylvester was amazing. That opened up all the doors because Sylvester was an international recording artist. I was able to never wait online for anything and get right in all the time because of that relationship. There were more drugs and I never had to pay for anything. I remember the first time I bought my own cocaine. People always gave me everything. They gave me everything. I can't even tell you how much. Those of you who never had that, don't be jealous, please. I've heard that already. First time I bought it, I remember in my head, I bought 1/4 gram of Coke, and I remember saying, this is going to be a problem. That was the moment that I felt like, this is a problem. I wanted my own for myself. I was still taking all of yours, whatever you offered me, gave me, but I wanted my own stash. I remember that night, it was at a club called Kamikaze, which is where Bruce Willis was a bartender and a doorman. Before his big stardom. I was probably 22 at the time, the first time I paid for my own drugs. And then I was in rehab. I turned 27 in my sobriety. So anyway, that rehab, I got sober. I loved AA. I identified with the disease. I realized I wasn't a bad person. I was a sick person and I needed help. That was so amazing. So that kept me going and I got involved. I chaired meetings. I sponsored guys, a lot of them. I was always in meetings. Now I'm going to share something with you, which is retrospect, because I did relapse at 5 years. So the retrospect is that although I went to a lot of meetings and I sponsored people, I let go of having a relationship with a higher power around year 2 or 3. Did I say a sponsor? I said a higher power. I let them both go. My relationship with higher power, sponsor, but yet I'm sponsoring 8 people. My ego took over. I was a Wall Street executive. I went just being clean and dry, made my career take off. I made a lot of money. I bought my first apartment in Chelsea, my dream apartment. And then I sat in that apartment and I looked off my terrace on 9th Avenue, 22nd Street. And I looked at my big apartment. I had 950 square feet, which I have now, by the way, but in Queens, not in Manhattan. And it was in a doorman building. I'm in a pre-war. I'm just saying, but back then I was like, this is what I always dreamt about. This was what I always thought was going to be. I was like, I started crying. Like, this is it. I was one of the people that would go to meetings. And I don't know if you've ever heard anyone do this, but every time I got a promotion, isn't AA great? They made me this. Look at my Camaro outside. I bought an apartment in Chelsea. Stay sober, guys. AA is awesome. That's who I was. And I didn't know that it's an inside job. I did not know any of that. All I knew is that I was very poor when I was younger. I made up my mind that I wasn't going to be that way. I had a certain persona because I was in Fire Island every summer and running around the big clubs with the guys that were like 10 years older than me. A lot of them died of AIDS. And I wanted to be just like them. And I finally arrived. So I went across the street. There was a drug dealer across the street. And I started to use. It took me 5 years to come back. I was one of those people. I've never been to jail. My family, we don't go to jail. I got arrested for drug dealing in my apartment. They banged in the door, just like the movies. Me and whoever was in my house, let's get on the floor. They put handcuffs and they were looking. They ripped my whole apartment apart. If you've ever had it happen to anyone on here, you know what I'm talking about. It's awful. And then they brought me to jail. To speed up, I hit many, many bottoms, became a skeletal human being, and eventually my family put me in jail. When I was in jail, they sold my apartment in Chelsea. I was looking at 7 to 10 the second time. I couldn't stop using. And then I got out of jail. Instead of it being 7 to 10 years, I got out. All of a sudden, they offered me a plea deal where I got out in 58 days, on my 58th day. And that was where my new life started, with nothing. I had to be stripped away of everything. Had to be. What I went through in that relapse was so much worse than before I had my 5 years at 26. I got clean and sober again at 37. It's been an amazing ride. Lots of pain, lots of joy. I realized, and my theme for this year has been, take this the right way, please. If I would have known how sick I was, I would have known how much work I had to do, I would have walked myself right out of it. I wouldn't have stayed. I wouldn't have stayed around. The other side of this, what a ride and what a roller coaster. And I had 10 years. I had suicidal ideation come back because I had suicidal ideation my whole life. In my first 10 years, I'd be like, isn't sobriety great? I haven't once thought about killing myself. And then I started to think, I don't want to use, but I wanted to die. What did I do with all that? I shared it. I was very honest. I brought it to you guys. That's where my authenticity has come from. I've learned that not everybody's going to like everything I say. Not everyone's going to like me. And some people on this meeting right now are probably saying, I can't believe you said that. I can't believe you're saying that. I'm not here to please you anymore. Those days are long over. I'm here to be authentic and to save my ass, not my face. And it's taken me a long, long time, a lot of pain, and I've made a lot of mistakes. Through the years, I chaired meetings, I had a lot of sponsees. I overchaired, I overserviced, I did too much service. Everybody was sick of seeing me. Adam's chairing that meeting over there. Adam's chairing that meeting, but it's what I needed. And I didn't know that I was too much. I oversponsored people. I got myself into parts of their lives that I had no business being in. I made a lot of mistakes. I didn't pick up no matter what. I didn't know I was making any mistakes. I just came with what I thought was what I needed, not picking up no matter what. Staying. I've had the same sponsor for 23 years. That's a whole other story. I could fill probably an auditorium with people, and that's not an ego statement, with the people that I've sponsored that picked up and went out or just disappeared or fired me or whatever the hell you guys do. Whatever we do, I kept the same sponsor. It's okay. In the beginning, the first few years, I thought it was my fault. I was doing something wrong. Why did he pick up? I'm not doing something right. Me over sponsoring and getting into people's lives is not force a drug or a drink down someone's throat or a needle in someone's arm. What we got to do is get another sponsor. I took responsibility for their relapses. Now I don't. I don't get upset when somebody wants to get another sponsor. I don't take any of that personally anymore. I'm still a work in progress. There's a lot I could talk about with my family and the relationship with my family through a lot of work. It's gotten so much better. I'm at a place with my family. The ones that put me in jail, by the way, 23 years ago. I'm at a place with my family where there's love and acceptance. It was me that's changed and worked on myself. They're still the same. I hope I've helped one person. If not, I hope I've helped 80. No, there's 80 people in this room. I'm just joking. And Tim, I love you. Thank you so much for having me speak. I love this group. This is great. Thank you.